Okay, and I'll just give it a second till I get the go ahead, which should be any moment. Okay, and I think there we go. So welcome to everyone on this rainy morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, and thank you all for joining us. So welcome to our reps, PACs, and parents that are here tonight. The only thing worse than no information is wrong information. So for my part, I'm going to strive to give you what is correct information. And if there's anything I've left out, it's either because I don't know, and where there are parts that I don't know, I'll make that clear that I don't know. And again, our purpose here is not to tell you what to do or how to do it. I don't have a degree in PAC 101. I don't have a bachelor. I don't have a master's. It is just from my experience as an investigator, as a researcher, as someone who's been involved in PACs in various degrees for about 20 years. This is sort of my experience and pieces together. Some of this information comes from information that is already out there on BCC PAC. Some of it is from other PACs. Lots of PACs have great ideas. And again, it's not about to tell you what to do. And I hope that during the course of this, as we have some discussion, that everyone is able to share some things that work for them or some ideas. This is really just exploring about how we can all improve and how we can do what we're doing better. And first of all, thank you to all of you for stepping up, for taking an interest, not just in this, but in being involved in your school community, for taking on leadership roles, which are not always easy. And part of the goal here, again, is some of the stuff you already know. I've been a trainer before as a police dispatcher, training other dispatchers. And part of what I do in my training role is to train the trainees to be trainers. So that is also part of my goal here, is not just to give you information, but information in a way that you can pass it on to your parents and PACs, and that you hopefully have the tools and resources to be able to do that. Sorry, one sec. So that's kind of the goal here, and it's just to have the discussion. It's really about having the discussion, sharing the information. As DPAC, we don't enforce. We don't judge what you're doing or what you're not doing. It is up to you and your PAC to determine. And the role here is just to hopefully give you some ideas and some tools on how to do that better. So as we go forward, first of all, we'd like to acknowledge and are grateful that the work of DPAC and our PACs takes place on the traditional and unceded territories of the Halkaninim speaking people of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. We also recognize all of our First Nations, Métis, Inuit students and their families in our school communities. And we also want to acknowledge the generational harm and tragedies caused to our Indigenous communities throughout the history of residential schools. And again, like we had at the DPAC meeting last night, there's a couple of links. I'm going to put this link into the chat here. So there's a couple of resources. The first one is through FINESC about understanding more about Indian residential schools and reconciliation resources. So, and the other one, we put this out last night as well. But this is the link for the registration sessions for Vital Conversations and the introduction to the Katzie history, culture, and people. It's a free registration, so I'd encourage, if you're able to attend that, to go to that. So welcome to all. It's good that we are all here. And then just because this is so important about just making these acknowledgements, and we encourage all PACs to make these acknowledgements, territory acknowledgement for our Katzie and our Kwantlen. And I'm just going to tell a bit of my personal story, just to sort of give a little bit of a framework. I don't identify as, I don't self-identify as Indigenous, and that's my journey that I'm still working on. But I'm just going to tell a little bit of a story because many Canadians have similar type stories. I'm going to try to keep this brief, and some of this is stuff I just learned recently. So my great grandfather traveled from Scotland to Saskatchewan in the late 1800s, and there he met my great grandmother. Her name was Isbister, and as far as the records can show, she was Cree, probably from Swampy Cree, but we don't really know for sure. And they had 16 to 19 children, one of whom was my grandmother, who I spent a lot of time growing up with as a small child. And in the census in the late 1800s, and I can only assume it was my great great grandfather put down in the census that all of their children were Indian, and that was on the census. And then as it came to residential schools, my understanding is that my great grandfather said, no, 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 my kids aren't Indian, they're white. And being a white Scottish man in Saskatchewan, I guess that gave him an opportunity to say, no, my kids aren't going to a residential school, one of whom was my grandmother, because they're white, even though they were proud to put on the census that their children were in fact Indian. So when I kind of think of that in perspective, and there were a lot of other, well, thousands of other families that didn't have that opportunity. And, I have to think that, that if it weren't for my great grandfather, who was obviously proud of the culture, and I've seen some pictures of my great grandmother in the traditional dress, not the stereotypical dress of First Nations that you sometimes see, but in sort of the regular dress, old black and white pictures, only a couple of them, but obviously there was some pride in that culture there. But my great grandfather, sorry, had an opportunity to say, no, my kids aren't going to a residential school. And if my grandmother had gone to a residential school, I don't know that I would be here today. And, and the other thing is that not only was there that, but my grandmother obviously had some kind of concern for that. And so growing up with me, she never discussed that heritage from her. Her mother was Cree, and that she was what they called back then half-blood. And I think she had a lot of concern for her own children with the racial comments that were being made in Saskatchewan, Manitoba at that time, and even today. And so she didn't talk about her culture, didn't talk about her mother very much or her background. And in fact, it was my aunt through a friend of hers who is Indigenous that went and did some of the research to find this stuff out. So a lot of that culture for me is lost. And there are families right across. I mean, and that's not even, forget about those who went through residential schools and lost family and culture and language and all those kind of things. So, so this is, we're all in this journey, but it is important. This is our culture. So anyway, it's important to think about, and so I just encourage all PACs to include your territory acknowledgement. It's a part of including the community. And it's a part of having that discussion, in particular about residential schools and then the Indian Act and other things that sort of paved the way for where we ended up. And hopefully we can pave that way to where we can move forward. So, I mean, we make the territorial acknowledgement, but I just wanted to share some of my story so that that it has some meaning. It has meaning to me anyway, that it's important that we make these acknowledgements, and not just acknowledgements, but participate in engagement as we move forward. And that's an important thing that PACs can do. So that's my story. Thank you for listening. So we'll go to the agenda here for the PAC 101-201 workshop. I know that the agenda already went out already. And really it is, we don't know what we don't know. And so I don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. So this is going to be our journey together to find out what we know, what we don't know, and we'll sort of touch on some things. And either way, we'll be finished in 2 hours, and we'll try and maybe a little bit sooner, but we'll see how it goes. If you have any questions during the course of this, please raise them. Again, this is just based on my experience of things I put together from a variety of different sources that I've vetted in my own way to be accurate. And yeah, at any time I have questions, either just put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and off it goes. So thank you. So part of the process of having the meeting is that we approve the agenda. And so why do we approve the agenda? So the agenda is basically an agreement between the chair or the executive and the group as a whole to say, okay, these are the things that we agreed to discuss at the meeting. And when you adopt the agenda, it's basically an agreement that, okay, these are the things we're going to talk about, and that's going to be the structure of our meeting. And when things start to go offline a little bit, and sometimes that's okay, but if things start to go too offline, the chair then has the authority to say, okay, hang on, we agreed, all of us agreed that this is what we're going to talk about in the agenda. So if that's something we still need to talk about, we can certainly bring that up later, or we can put a pin in it till next time. But we do have an agenda that we have to get through. We all agreed to this agenda, and that's why we have this motion. And it just helps to sort of keep that that meeting in order. Now, a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about types of governance. Mostly what we're going to be talking about is the Roberts Rules type of governance, only because that is the one that generally most PACs use, although some PACs use other ones as well. So that's going to be sort of the structure of that. But at any time, again, if you have any questions, please ask. So when we do, so this is a motion. We'll talk more about motions later. And again, this is really simple. It's stuff that we're really already doing. I'm just sort of helping to try and provide some context into why we do it. So the motion is put forward or proposed, usually by the chair, but any member should be able to put a motion forward with some structure as allowed by the chair. So I would like to propose a motion that the agenda be adopted as presented. And if you can just click on a raise of hands, I need someone to move this motion. So it's not before the floor yet until first of all someone moves the motion. So can I get someone to raise their hand? Thank you. Dog raised their hand. And can I get someone to second the motion? Anyone able to second the motion? Oh, I saw a seconder on the motion. Thank you very much. The motion cannot move forward until it's been seconded. So, but someone who moves the motion and someone who seconds the motion does not mean that you agree with the motion. It just means that you agree to have the motion heard and brought forward to the floor. So it can't be brought to the floor until it's been moved and seconded, but you can completely disagree with the motion or vote or intend to vote against it and still move and second the motion. It does not mean that you agree to it. So once the motion's been moved and then seconded, now it's open for discussion. So now it's on the floor. It has been moved and seconded. It is now officially before the floor. Is there any discussion on the agenda that was presented? Okay, and then at that point, the chair would look around, make sure that nobody has anything to say. And it's important in a meeting to make sure that everybody has their voice. So some of that language would include, okay, seeing no questions, meaning that everybody's now had an opportunity and nobody's raising their hand. I will now call the question, which is the motion. So the motion is that the adoption be that the agenda be adopted as presented or distributed, and that is the question. And then you say, okay, all those in favor and any opposed. So we'll just launch this quickly so everybody gets a chance. And this is kind of what it would look like. So this is the question. The question is the motion, that the agenda be adopted as presented or distributed. So everyone have your vote. Yeah, that's great. Okay, and we'll give it 10, 5, 4. You guys are awesome. Okay, so we'll just end the poll there. It's just for practice. Again, we don't really have it. We have a program, not necessarily agenda, but we're just going through the practice of doing it. So so now I'm going to share the results so that everybody see, and just so everybody knows, all the poll, we only have a couple of polls in here. They are all anonymous. And all our polls, whether we do them for you guys, as we've done some for other PACs for their Zoom meetings, or for us, they're all anonymous, which is essentially secret ballot. So then we can share the results, and then nobody knows who voted for what, and everybody's free to vote their conscience. So that's kind of the structure of that. And then the motion is either carried or it's defeated. And usually it's 50+1 to be carried. In a tie vote, the motion is defeated. So it needs to be more than 50 more. So it has to be a majority. Okay, now the most important thing, and I'm going to say this several times, is that we are all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. And that is the most important thing to remember. And as we go through some of this stuff, and some of this stuff may seem like, well, this sounds complicated, or this sounds whatever, it is just putting a framework, and it doesn't mean we have to do all these things. It's just trying to set a foundation for some of the things that you could do, or some things that you could consider to applying to who you are and how you run as a PAC. So are there any questions on what we have so far? Okay, and even if you have a question, you can either just type it in the chat or press Q for a question as we go along, and we'll just keep moving right along. So my name is Christel Sorensen. I'm the SD42 DPAC recording secretary. I've been involved for PACs for a long time. I've served in a number of executive roles in PACs over the last 4 or 5 years. I served in pretty much every role except for treasurer, and lots of good reasons for that. I don't have the skills to be able to do that, and I certainly respect those who can. And really is just Yeah, most of you know me already, so I'll kind of leave it at that. But I'm happy to present before you. And again, I'm not here to tell you what to do. We're just trying to sort of explore some ideas and hopefully give you some more tools to be able to move forward. So the 9 most dangerous words in the PAC are, "This is the way we have always done it." And that likely translates to, we really don't know why we are doing it this way, why we are doing this, or why we are doing it this way. And it's not just in the PAC, but many organizations have that, whereas, well, this is just the way we've always done it. So what I hope to sort of touch on during the course of this workshop is to help you to not say this is the way we've always done it, and to say, well, we do it this way because. And if you need to shift some of your things, now you have a reason. That's the most important thing. Why are you doing anything? Why are you making a motion? If you can say why you're making a motion, then that's important, because you don't want to be just saying, well, I don't know, that's just why we do it, right? If you understand why you're doing it, and you can help other parents understand about why you're doing it, then you're passing on that information, and all of this contributes to engagement, which we'll be talking about later. So everything that we're going to be talking about all contributes to engagement with parents and PACs. And it is a process. It is a 1 to 3 to 4 year process to do that. And again, just sort of take it bit by bit. But just be cognizant, this is the way we have always done it, is probably not the best answer to have. And so we're going to try and help you have a different answer. So we're going to go right back to the fundamentals on what is PAC. And it's in the School Act. And in 1989, the provincial government amended the School Act to entitle parents in every district across British Columbia the right to establish and belong to a parent advisory council at their children's schools. The Act also established the right of the PAC through its elected officers, and this is important because this is in the School Act, the elected officers, to advise the board, that's the school board, the principal and staff, generally through the principal, of their school respecting any matter relating to the school. And here we have, and I'll just include this just for your information. This is the link for the School Act. And if you're able to pull it up, you can see it is a lengthy document. It is amended, I wouldn't say regularly, but there are small parts that are changed throughout. But you are here today, and I'm here today, and we're all here today because of the School Act. Now, prior to PACs being in the School Act, there were a number of provincial parent groups that spoke to parents going back to the early 1900s, that spoke to the school and spoke to, and organized around the school. So it wasn't like there were parent groups beforehand, but it was never in the School Act. It was never legislated. This is a legislated right under the School Act. So this is why we exist and why we're here. So what are some important PAC rules? And this is by no means comprehensive. These are just some things to think about. Again, many of you know this already, but we're just going to touch on it. And even if we're just reinforcing the things that you already know, sometimes we don't get that reinforcement, and we're doing things the right way, but nobody's telling us we're doing the right way. So I hope that we're doing that as well. So providing a forum for parents to engage with your administrator about school activities and programs, looking at ways to provide better opportunities for students, improving learning outcomes, and providing educational opportunities and development for parents. Building your school community with school events, like post-COVID mostly, and promoting parent involvement in those events and through the school. Using your social media to remind parents about school events, COVID protocols, a daily health check, mask use, etc., from reliable and official sources. And providing community resources for parents and much more. So there's just some ideas. There's lots more that PACs can do, but sort of just some, and many of you are doing this already. So other considerations for PACs, I'm going to put these in here as well. Screen is too small. So there's two. So there's two things that you can look at as well, and this has to do with the advocacy role for PACs. So the one I've included here is specific to SD42 PACs and is in regards to the school growth plan summary. So you can go through this, and each school has a school growth plan, and you can, as you go through those documents, you can see for your school what the school growth plan is and what the priorities are and how they're going to get there, the objectives, and consider engaging with your administrator and being involved in that school growth plan as it develops. Right now, the school growth plans for SD42 are being developed for 2021, 2022. So engage with your administrators and see if you can have some input into those school growth plans. The other thing is the strategic facilities review. There's an update from June of 2021, and in the coming weeks, there will be a survey that's going out to the community and to parents from the district into what people would like to see in their facilities, and we'll be making that link public when it comes out. If you look at that link, the bottom pages from 62, it's a long document, but from 62 to 118 in alphabetical order, elementary schools first and secondary schools after that. You can actually see what the review is, the facilities review for your school. So that's something that you can also review. You can bring to a PAC meeting. I mean, your administrator of the PAC meeting may not be able to do a whole lot about it, but certainly having that discussion in the school and bringing that to the attention of the parents as to where those things are can also help you as a PAC to decide, where do you want your resources to go? Is there some way that you can contribute? Not that PACs have to, provide facilities stuff, but certainly is there a way that you can contribute to promote that, even if it's just on an advocacy level, right? And then I'm just going to touch on this because there's a lot of things I keep thinking about at the last minute, and I sort of added at the end. I should have had this own one, but when you're communicating with PACs, you have to remember the PIPA, which is the Personal Information and Protection Act, and that's sort of another discussion. But essentially, I think most PACs are doing this already. If you're collecting emails and you're collecting personal information from your parents to be involved in PAC activities and that kind of stuff, you just have to guard that information carefully. And don't release it without their permission. PACs do have an obligation and can be held responsible if that information is intentionally abused. So just to be careful of that. I mean, sure, most PACs are doing that already, but be careful with the private information as a PAC executive that your parents are sending to you in regards to their phone number, email, etc. Okay, and ultimately, the most important thing is your parent voice. This is in the School Act, and it's your voice generally through the executive, but the membership passes that on to the executive to take to the administrators. And that's your most important role. It is having that discussion, having that engagement with your administrators in your school, and building those relationships with your administrator and your school community. The School Act guarantees your parent voice, but collaboration, relationship building, and engagement is what makes that happen. So, you can say, yeah, I can go to the principal, and basically the principal can't say, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to listen to you. They can't say that. They have to, they sort of have to listen to you. But your engagement with them beforehand is going to may affect the outcome of that, right? Especially if it's a choice that an administrator can make to say, sure, I can do this, or sure, I don't want to do this, right? So that is the most important thing. Yes, your voice, you can always have your voice, but how it is heard at the other end is largely related to your relationship. So just remember that. And again, we are all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. I'm going to say it over and over again. This is the most important thing. Are there any questions for anybody from anybody on this so far? Okay, well, we will move along then. So who and what is a PAC member? So this is legislated under the School Act and for parents' entitlements and responsibilities. Under 7.1 of the School Act, a parent of a student of school age attending a school is entitled, A, to be informed in accordance with the orders of the minister of the student's attendance, behavior, and progress in school, and B, to belong to a parent's advisory council established under Section 8. Now, attending is, we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but there is attending, there is registered, there is a couple of interchangeable words. I personally don't like the word attending. I think registered is more appropriate. However, that's the language that we deal with. And so if you are a parent, you meet that definition, that's an entitlement and a responsibility. And again, this is legislated under the School Act. So what is attending? Enrolled, registered. Basically, it comes down to Form 1701. And Form 1701 is a document that is submitted by the schools to the district, and then the district to the ministry to establish funding essentially based on the enrollment of the school come the end of September, and then it's redone again in well, my dates are wrong, so I'll leave that out, but a little bit later. But at the end of September, the first part is determine funding. And so it includes information that that the ministry relies on to determine funding. That includes name, birth date, gender, grade level, postal code, the languages, Indigenous education enrollment, self-identification, reserve residency, career programs, special needs category, all these kind of things. And that data is collected, and that is what is determined to be attending. And what is belong? Because this is always important as well. And what is the definition of belong? A definition of belong is to be a member or part of a particular group, organization, or class. In this case, a legislated entitlement. And in the commonly held fundamental principles of Robert's Rules and most forms of democratic governance, all members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. Again, it's just something to think about. And then who or what is a parent? Well, a parent is defined under the School Act. And a parent means in respect of a student of a child register, in respect of a student, which is someone who's registered at a school, or of a child registered under Section 13, which is a child registered for home education. And then as a parent or other person who has guardianship or custody of the student or child, other than a parent or person who under an agreement or order made under the Family Law Act that allocates parental responsibilities does not have parental responsibilities in relation to the student's or child's education, which sounds confusing, but it essentially means is that some families, for various reasons, have certain parental responsibilities for their children, and sometimes that does not include a parental responsibility in relationship to that student or child's education. So they can make decisions about their health decisions and that kind of thing, but for whatever reason, under usually through the Ministry of Children and Families or some other court order, they don't have any parental responsibilities for their child as a student, and can't make education decisions as to what school they go to and programs they take and that sort of thing. It's relatively, I don't want to say rare because I don't actually know, but it's not most people is the parent that's registered of a child. I'm just telling you what's in the School Act. And then B, which is probably the most important one, is a person who usually has the care and control of the student or child. So who could that include? Could include a grandparent, it could include an aunt, it could include anyone that usually has the care and control of the student or child. So the definition of a parent belonging to a PAC, meeting the definition of a parent who's then entitled to belong to a PAC, can be quite broad. So I would encourage you to consider that. And that's not two parents, for instance. I know some PACs say each two parents have one vote. But the School Act is clear. Every parent has a vote. If you meet the definition of a parent, you can belong to a PAC and you are a member individually. So then what are schools, right? And these are important things to remember. Schools are public places with restricted access. And we've particularly seen that during COVID, where there has been restricted access due to the pandemic. And that's important to remember because it's not just a free building for anybody to walk into. And there are certain rules and policies that are in place, and for a number of good reasons. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Parents are also, schools are also workplaces for staff. And it's important for parents to remember that. And not just for you guys, but also to pass on to your parents. When you walk into the office, that's a workplace. When you're walking in the hallway, that is a workplace. When you're in the school kitchen, putting stuff together, that is a workplace. When you're doing stuff in the gym, that is a workplace. When you're doing stuff outside on the school grounds, that is a workplace. And it is important to remember and to be considerate of the people that are at the school. This is where they work, right? This is their workplace, and we just have to remember to be cognizant of that and to respect that in regards to everything else that we may need to do. And it's also important to know that parents do not have the right to enter a school or a classroom without the permission of the administrator. Now that can be implied, where, if you have sort of an agreement that's unsaid or whatever, that you're going to come in and do that, or just by phone, I'm going to come in, oh yeah, sure, no problem. But it's always with the permission with the administrator. Every person that walks into the school that is not a staff member or a student is a guest. And also parents and volunteers, administrators have the final say on anything that occurs or goes into the school or on school property. Now, some of those decisions can be appealed to the district, but generally the district is going to support the principal because that's the principal's decision or the administrator's decision. And again, whether some of those things happen or not really depends on the relationship that you have with your administrator. So another thing that's important. And again, I'll reiterate, visitors, that's all parents, all volunteers are considered visitors. And I'm going to talk more about this sort of post-pandemic because it's a little bit different now in the most cases. But every time you go into a school, every time you go into a school, it's district policy, first of all, that you need to sign in at the office and then sign out when you leave. This is important for a number of reasons. And when you're at the office, usually they'll have a school tag for you to wear that says visitor on it. And you should always wear that anytime you're around the school or on school property. And there's a number of reasons for that. And I know some people say, well, I'm in the school all the time. Again, post-COVID. I'm in school all the time. Everybody knows who I am. And that may be true, but there are going to be TOCs who do not know who you are. There are going to be children in the school who do not know who they are. Sometimes you'll get a staff member in the office who may not know who you are. And having the tag on it while you're in the school, either volunteering or helping out or whatever, is a sort of a sign to all the staff in the school, whether they know you or not, and all the kids in the school, whether they know you or not, that you have been checked in, that you have a right to be there, and that you have permission to be there, and that you're okay. This is a security issue because if we see someone walking through the halls and they're not wearing a tag, we know they haven't been signed in, and we don't know if they should be there, right? And if we have people in the schools that shouldn't be there, we want someone to report that. So wearing the tag, again, it's policy, district policy, but it's more than just policy. It's also a safety thing. So encourage your parents when they go into the school and they're volunteering in the school, sign in at the office. It's also because of fire regulations. If the fire alarm goes off, you have to be accounted for. And I've been in a school when the fire alarm has gone off. Well, I've been signed in and I had to be accounted for. So it is those things as well. So there's a number of reasons. It's not just, and it's setting example as a leader to say, this is what we all need to do. And it's for the safety of our staff and our students. And also a reminder that most PAC purchases for a school, unless specified, belong to the school or district once purchased and put into the school. So that includes everything from basketballs to tables to emergency preparedness supplies and outdoor equipment. PACs fund these things very often, but once they're funded, they don't belong to the PAC. They are then taken over by the school district. So an exception may be, say, for instance, a popcorn machine. So the PAC buys a popcorn machine that they're going to use at events or whatever. And it's made clear that the PAC has purchased this. It is for the PAC to have and use. But then it's up to the administrator to say whether the PAC can keep that in the school. So again, it's based on that relationship because your administrator can say, sorry, we don't have any room at the school. You're going to have to take that home or take it out of the school. And they have every right to do that. So if you've got tables that have been purchased by PAC and you say, well, these are PAC tables, your administrator can ask you to remove them from the school. So, I mean, I know there's symbiotic relationships that work for those kinds of things, but best policy is, to keep PAC purchases minimal for PACs, but any funds, anything that PAC funds, they are generally the property of the school. And just to sort of illustrate that, there was a PAC up north a few years ago that PAC purchased a snowblower. We don't need them here, but up north for the school to use at about $3,000 or $4,000 or whatever it was. And a couple of years later, the next principal that came in turned around and sold it. Well, they have the right to do that because it belongs to the school. And the PAC was upset about it, but that's how it goes. So remember, once you purchase those things, they generally do not belong to PAC anymore. They belong to the school, and the school district can do with it as they will. So just important to remember. And then again, we're going to touch on some key articles in the School Act that apply directly to PACs, and we'll kind of go through this a little bit quickly. Famous last words, I keep saying that. So this is one of the most important ones in terms of what we can do in the school. So 7.1, subject to this act, the regulations and any rules of a board. It means that the board can make rules determining how this works, including access to a school and other things. A parent of a student may provide volunteer services at or for a school. So this is in here for a couple of different reasons. One is to address collective agreement language for parents that may be doing what would be considered bargaining unit work. So maybe helping out in the office, doing phone calls for late students. And I'm not recommending any of these things. I'm just saying that these are things that people have done. Or helping out in the classroom and doing work in the classroom with the direction of the teacher to say, oh, could you please help me with this, that they can volunteer and do that work that isn't taking away work from somebody else. Now, that being said, we do want to be cognizant of our partners' collective agreements, whether it be CUPE or the BCTF, and that yes, we can help out with these things, but we don't want to take their jobs at the same time. Now, in most cases, that is not happening, but that is one of the reasons why this is there. And again, the school district can make provisions and regulations on how those volunteer services work, volunteer services work, how you get access to the school, what you need to do, and that includes signing in at the office, signing out at the office, and wearing a tag. Now, some of you may or may not know this already, but there is, in the School Act, there is a provision for video surveillance cameras. And I'm just sort of giving this as an example, just so that you know that there are things in the School Act that apply specifically to PACs. And I'll just touch on this quickly. I keep saying that and then I don't. But for video surveillance cameras, it is in the School Act that prior approval of the Parents Advisory Council must be provided before those go in, with some exceptions. And that a Parents Advisory Council can make recommendations to a board to install video cameras at a school. So that's another option for PACs. If you're getting a lot of vandalism at your school and that kind of thing, you can certainly advocate for video cameras in and around the school. And if video cameras are coming into the school because the school district would like to see them there for maybe the same reasons, they do need to have your PAC approve it first. So PACs do have some authority there. And this generally applies to secondary schools who have specialty academy programs. And this has been an issue a little bit in our district, because for the last 2 years, I'm not completely satisfied that this has been met by our school district. So specialty academies include some of the things that baseball, basketball, or the specialty academies that go on, hairdressing. And in order for this sort of to go through, the board must consult with the Parents Advisory Council for the school where the board proposes to offer the specialty academy. And then a schedule of fees has to be established. And before establishing the schedule of fees, and again, this is in the School Act, or this is a requirement, that a board must consult with the Parents Advisory Council for the school where the specialty academy is offered and obtain the approval of that Parents Advisory Council for the schedule of fees. It is not for up to those secondary PACs to provide their approval. It is up to the board or designate to obtain your approval. So if they want to change the schedule of fees, and I've seen this before where our board, other boards have discussed the Academy of fees and thinking maybe it's too high or too low, then they need to be talking to your PAC that has the specialty, because it is your PAC that approved those fees. The board establishes the fees that your PAC has approved. And if the board changes those fees, and if your PAC has already approved them, then that would be a violation of the School Act. So the board needs to do that, and they should be reaching out to your PAC as a secondary PAC to say prior, and this is usually in April, May, for most PACs, that the schedule of fees comes up for the next year. And this is a responsibility for secondary PACs, because it's not just setting the schedule of fees, but if you've got a program, for instance, and it's going to cost $15,000, right? And it should be revenue neutral for the parents that are going into the Academy of fees. But you may want to look at it and say, okay, well, it's been $15,000 for the last 10 years. Is it costing more, or is it costing less for these programs? Is that about right? And if the academy program is actually costing more, then where is that subsidy coming from? Is that subsidy coming from other school programs that now that the money is coming away from? And are parents being overcharged for these things, right? So secondary PACs have a very specific obligation and responsibility when it comes to specialty academies. And for any secondary PACs, you can always reach out to DPAC. I know that we've talked to you over the last couple of years about this before. but you do set the fees. You approve the fees, and the board establishes the fees that you approve when it comes down to that. And also in the School Act is it gives parents, and this is specifically for parents, but something for you to explain to your parents, is that the parents are entitled to examine all your student records kept by a board or school pertaining to that student, and that you can request, then on payment of a fee, if there is any, to receive a copy of any student record that you are entitled to under that. And that the board may charge you for copies of that. So any parent can go and get those records, and that is in the School Act. And usually schools and boards are well aware of that, so it's not much of an issue, but be aware of that. And the other thing is that under Section 10, is that if property of a board or Francophone Education Authority is destroyed, damaged, lost, or converted by the intentional or negligent act of a student, that student and that student's parents are jointly and severally liable to the board in respect of the act of that student. So, and what that means is that if a student commits damage to the school, for example, the student and the parents are jointly responsible, but severally also means that they are also individually responsible. So they're jointly responsible and individually responsible for any damage to property that occurs at the school, whether it be to a laptop, intentional, remember, intentional or negligent act, that they are responsible. So that's an important thing that you can pass on to your parents. We just had a couple of pieces of vandalism at our school, and I had to pass this information on to the parents at our school. And parents need to know that, right? And certainly as a PAC, I encourage our parents to have a conversation with your kids, especially, well, let's say older kids, if they're out in the community and they're unsupervised and on their own, to be cognizant of appropriate behavior in and around schools. That includes, how to handle, how to be around portables or garbage containers or fencing or anything like that, and to treat that property with respect, and that that any damage that occurs from their children as a result of that, if it's intentional or negligent, that they can be held responsible. And it's just sort of a message to get out as a leadership message in the community to remind parents that this is and has been a reality for some parents. So just some things to think about as relates to parents. And again, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any questions or comments or anything about that so far? Okay, we'll move right along. So we're going to touch quickly on this. I keep saying that, I don't know why. So we're going to touch on sort of three forms of governance. I'm going to focus on Robert's Rules only because that is sort of a structure that most PACs seem to be more comfortable with. But there are other ones, and one is consensus-based decision-making, and one is dynamic facilitation. They're just two other examples. I know very little, I know and understand very little about dynamic facilitation, but I'm just offering it as an option in the form of governance. That may require a change in your constitution and bylaws to sort of do that thing, but it's just to offer that there is not just Robert's Rules, there are other forms. So Robert's Rules is efficient at getting through an agenda. It offers predictability. Everybody can look at the rules. Everybody can say, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. And it gives a framework sort of as a third party to say, well, how do we do this? Oh, well, this is what the rules say. This is the rules we agreed to follow. So this is, I guess, what we're going to do. And I'll just kind of skip through some of this. And so the benefits of it are justice and courtesy, maintenance of order, consideration of one item at a time so people aren't talking over each other. All sides get heard, ability for everyone to provide input, majority rule, and protection of the rights of all members, including the minority. Most PACs consider the intent of Robert's Rules of Order, either as stated in their constitution and bylaws, or just simply as a matter of course. I mean, how many PACs are experts at parliamentary procedure? I mean, we're volunteers, right? So we're just trying to provide a framework of sort of some basic understanding. And some commonly held fundamental principles for Robert's Rules is that, sorry, I'm gonna need to get some water soon. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. No person can speak until recognized by the chair. Full and free discussion. Quorum must be present. That's important. We'll talk about that later. A majority decides the question, a motion essentially. Silence gives consent. That means if you don't vote, the decision is going to be made by those who do. And the chair should always remain impartial. The chair is the one who's generally facilitating the process. They still should have a vote, but their position as chair shouldn't influence people into voting. So if you say, well, as chair, I'm telling you to vote this way, that would be inappropriate. But as a chair, you could either say, okay, I'm going to pass the chair to the vice chair for a moment so I can speak to this, and this is my personal view. I mean, I don't think that's necessary, but I think as a chair, you could say, well, this is my personal view. And this is how I feel about it, and these are the reasons. You can still discuss it, but you want to be careful. It's a fine line, but yeah, chair should remain impartial and really contribute to facilitating the discussion in a fair way. Consensus-based decision making can be good at making decisions that everyone agrees to. There's a lot of First Nations group that use this kind of idea, which is based on consensus. And some PACs are really already doing a combination of Robert's rules and consensus based already. And so, it's characterized by, it's not so much by process, but it is about discussion, coming to agreement, making concessions. And again, similar type process where everybody gets a chance to be heard, but not as formal as Robert's rules. And so some important characteristics are collaboration, cooperation, egalitarianism, inclusion, and participation. Participation is very important, and sometimes consensus decision-making can, sorry. Participation is probably one of the most important things because all the rest will follow based on your participation. And dynamic facilitation, again, this is just an example. There are other examples. These are 3 of quote unquote most common ones. I really don't get it. It basically involves a facilitator, which I guess takes on the position of the chair, and people shoot ideas at the facilitator. The facilitator takes those ideas and sort of puts them into some kind of thing. It's here just for people to look at, but I really don't get it. And I think it would be difficult to do in a PAC. I think it's more for, this is something that might work in a committee where people are just kind of talking about ideas about things that they want to do. And that the committee chair could act as a facilitator in a way to sort of take out these ideas. But at a general PAC meeting, I don't know how successful these would be. But again, just ideas to consider about what this means. And you can go through these when you get through them if you want to. And these are just stuff that I've taken to find to sort of just describe it. And again, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Are there any questions on Robert rules or any of those things that I'm able to answer, or do you have anything that you want to share on those things? Okay, I'm just going to take 1 minute because I need some water, and I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. So just so I don't feel like I'm talking to the void, can everybody just give me a hands up just so I know that people are actually still there? Okay, great. Thank you. And again, at any time, if you want to jump in, yeah, anytime you want to jump in, please just say so. Yeah, I'm hoping everybody's still awake and the rest of that's all good. Okay. So we will move on then to Constitution and bylaws. And this is generally something that could sort of be its own 2-hour presentation, depending on what you want to do, but I'm going to break it down into sort of a few minutes. We're going to touch on the things, hopefully to give you some ideas of what you may want to look at. Oh, good. That's the next one. Okay. So basically, what is the Constitution and bylaws? And again, some of this you already know already, but I'm just trying to put it into a framework for that maybe you can pass on to your parents who are asking you the question. So Constitution essentially is who you are, what are your purposes, and what are your objectives. And that's kind of laid out in the School Act, but you can expand on that to what is important to you and what is important to your school community. And your bylaws is the means and procedures by which you accomplish your purposes and objectives. And that's sort of the rules that you follow. And it's important that the rules are there because then everybody knows, your executive knows, all your parents know, this is what we do in this circumstance. And it's always good to have because things go great until they aren't going so great anymore. And when they don't go so great anymore, you can always fall back in your constitution and bylaws. And that's really why it's important. When people are getting along and it's all great and people are making decisions, it's all great. But eventually, at some point, and this will happen in any PAC, somebody will say, I don't think we're doing this right. And that's when you go back to your constitution and bylaws and you say, okay, well, this is what we need. Yes, we are doing it right. Or yes, okay, we need to change our things. We either need to change how we're doing it or we need to amend our constitution and bylaws. So it is an important document. It's really a safety net. I mean, it's a guide as in a business plan, but it's also a safety net to make sure that you can say, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do. And dissolution. And the reason why dissolution is here is because it's required under the School Act to have language in your constitution and bylaws regarding dissolution. And dissolution is essentially what happens when your PAC can no longer exist under the School Act. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as well. So the School Act and the Constitution and bylaws. So Parents Advisory Council, through its elective officers, may advise the board and the principal and the staff of the school or provincial school respecting any matter relating to the school or the provincial school. Number 5 has to do with a PAC making its first constitution and bylaws. And we've had a couple of those in the last couple of years. And in consultation with the principal, must make bylaws governing its meetings and the business and conduct of its affairs, which is what the CNB does, including bylaws governing the dissolution and the repealed from 2015 actually just has to do with the SPCs, which is no longer in the School Act, so that's why that's repealed. And then C, the election of a member to represent the Parents Advisory Council on the DPAC, and that is the DPAC rep. And number 6, in the School Act, that voting at an election referred to in subsection 5C, the election of the DPAC rep at your PAC, must be by secret ballot, and this is required by the School Act, or legislated in the School Act. So reviewing and amending your constitution and bylaws, and I'm going to put 2 links in here as well. And again, these will, it's just if you want to see them now, but the links are all going to be in the PDF when it goes out. So here are 2 templates. It's a good idea to review your CNB annually or at least every 2 years. A CNB committee can be formed that consists of your PAC members to review languages and processes. And it should help your PAC provide a framework to make the rules clear to all members and essentially amounts to a business plan that leads to your PAC success and transparency. Constitution and bylaws is not meant to restrict what you can do. It's meant to provide a framework that provides transparency and accountability to the membership to say, this is how we do it, and we do it this way because of our constitution and bylaws. And SD42 DPAC, we can help you understand some of the language means. We can provide advice if requested, but we do not judge nor enforce any aspect of a PAC's CNB. We are a resource only. Judgment and enforcement of your constitution and bylaws is up to each PAC. So if you have a certain language and you say, I don't really understand what that means, and that is quite common in constitution and bylaws because that's just the way we've always done it, is that we can help to provide some context for what the language means. We can help provide, say, okay, well, this is what it could mean here. This is what it could mean there. Here are some consequences to the language and that sort of thing. And then and then it would be up to you guys to decide how you want to do it. But certainly we can help you with the language or help you come up with language that you want to see in your constitution and bylaws. And generally the committee can review and propose amendments that are brought to a PAC meeting for approval. Many CNB language amendments require specific advance notice, like a month or 2 months or 14 days or whatever the directions are in your constitution and bylaws, and usually requires a 2/3 vote to pass the amendment. But again, that would be in your constitution and bylaws. And in there are 2 SD42 PAC draft templates for constitution and bylaws. It is by no means perfect. It had been worked on well pre-COVID, and it's kind of been with some minor changes has been sort of sitting there. SD42 DPAC does, we should be going through our own constitution and bylaws and amending them. That's something that's been our list that we haven't done yet. So if there's anybody that would like to, any DPAC rep for sure, that would like to be on that committee to review and update our constitution and bylaws, which badly needs updating, please let us know. And of course, if there's any parent or PAC that would like to participate in that process, please let us know and we can do that as well.
Chris, sorry, I'm not sure if you can see, but there is a question.
Oh, perfect. No, I couldn't see. Thank you.
They have their hand up, Sugar Glider.
Oh, Sugar Glider, go ahead. Oh, Sugar Glider, you got a question?
Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Sugar Glider.
Okay.
Perfect.
Carry on as we were. So thank you. So dissolution, and this is important because I've seen many PACs sort of discuss about what this kind of might look like. And the School Act stipulates that every constitution bylaws must have this language. Dissolution of a PAC should be consistent with the School Act regarding school closures and or in the event that a PAC no longer meets the requirements to be a PAC according to the School Act. So the School Act changes the requirements of a PAC, then that could result in dissolution. PACs should only ever dissolve in the event of a permanent school closure and in the absence of any relocation or transition language. So for instance, Alexander Robinson, for instance, was the old school site 20 years ago, I guess, or so, was destroyed, and the new site was then built about 3 blocks away. It wasn't a brand new school. It was meant to replace an existing school. So I don't know what happened then, but the PAC should have been able to transition from the old location to the new location because it is simply a change in location. Even the name stayed the same. And that was the 3rd iteration of Alexander Robinson. So if that's the case, and sometimes that happens where the school is just old and a new school needs to be replaced, the PAC should be able to transition, and the board has the authority to transition, to establish the transition of that PAC into a school that's replacing an old school. And that's important because if you need to update your address or say there's a name change, you know, Alexander Robinson was destroyed and now it's Bert Cummings School. In order for your PAC to change their financial documents, the board can establish that change, that it is essentially the same PAC, but there's been a name change and an address change. So, I mean, and certainly if that happened in our school district, I don't see it happening anytime in the near future, but that's certainly something that we would be advocating for PACs. But the reason is, I just want to say that that is really the only reason, or there's one reason. Sorry, I'm getting lost. Okay, for example, if your school is closed and students are directing to a pre-existing school that likely already have a PAC, then the PAC should dissolve. So we've got a school closing. So we've got a school on the east side, school on the west side, and you're in the school in the middle, and that school is now slated for closure, but they're going to shift students from one school to the other. One of the PACs, I guess we would have to work on how that, one of the PACs from those should be transitioning to the new school, because this is sort of because they're being redirected to that, right? This is their new school. And this is a little bit different. Tuscanela, for instance, was a new school, but with the exception of, but that was a brand new school. It wasn't replacing a school. It was an addition school. So that would be a new PAC, right? So that would be a new PAC established. But again, that's something that we can sort of look at as the circumstances allow. But again, the important part is that you should only ever dissolve if your school is closed and is not being replaced. PACs can exist without a single executive member. And this is what sometimes I hear from PACs is that, well, I guess we don't have a chair, so we're going to have to dissolve. No. You can have 0 executive members. You may not be able to conduct business very well, but certainly your PAC can still exist and should exist for a number of reasons. And we're going to talk about the perception of autocracy versus democracy. Now, there's autocratic democracy, there's democratic autocracy, but we're going to focus on just these as ideas for PACs to consider. So in what is the perception of an autocratic PAC, the decisions are generally often made by the executive or members of the executive with little input from the membership as a whole. And so those other members may not participate or be more involved because they feel that involvement is minimal, or that they don't feel that they're involved in the decision process. So why would they bother? In a more democratic, the perception of a democratic PAC executive or PAC is that decisions are made by the membership as a whole, but are facilitated by the executive, and the executive carries out the will of the membership as they decide. And involvement might be improved if members feel that they are critical to the decision-making process. So these are things, and and a lot of these perceptions come from movies, and especially American movies about PTAs and all that kind of stuff, where it's going, and nobody wants to be a part of that, right? So it is a challenge to get past those perceptions. So these are things to think about, how you can get past those perceptions. And again, all of this has to do with engaging your parents. We'll talk a little bit about engagement, but everything that's come before here, and including this, is about engagement. So again, some things to think about, and it is the vicious circle, right? You'll hear from a parent, well, I don't go to a PAC meeting because decisions have already been made, and they're going to be made without whether I go or not anyway, and PACs are just cliquey and exclusive. So you get, that quite often I hear something along those lines. And then you get the other side where it's the executive and the few that show up that are making the decisions because nobody else is there. And because nobody else is there, it's the same people doing the same work and the same people hanging out. So it does look cliquey and exclusive, but it's because nobody else is showing up. So how do we break that, right? And there's no easy answer to that. It is incorporating all of the stuff that we talked about before, all of the stuff that we're talking about after. It is a 2 to 3 year process to encourage parents that the things that they're seeing and movies and TV is not who you are, right? And that we need you to show up. And you can keep, I've said the same thing for the last 4 years. And then, I just had a couple of parents that got it last week. So, you can keep saying, we all know, we always put out, whether it's hot lunches or whatever, notice goes out in portal, notice is posted at the school, notice goes into backpacks and whatever. And you're always going to get somebody who said, oh, nobody told me about it. Like, that's just, you just have to deal with that, right? But just consider the vicious circle and consider how you can take steps to break that circle. And it is a work in progress. There is no easy answer, and it incorporates all the things we've talked about before and all the things we'll talk about after, as tools to try and reach out and break that. But just understand that circle is there. And the perception of PACs to parents as well is, are you considered an information resource, or are you considered a vendor, right? Are parents looking to the PAC executive for accurate and reliable information? Are they providing resource information, information about the school, making calendars, doing this kind of thing? And do parents trust that they can rely on that information and look to that information to make informed decisions? Or are you selling goods more than you are information? And is your financial statement more important than your information currency? And your information currency can really lead to more engagement as time goes on. And again, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So just see where you are. I mean, it's always a balance. And I'm not anti-fundraising. I've participated in fundraising myself, but it is a balance. And I've seen PACs where they say to parents, send us $50 and we won't bother you anymore. I don't want your money. I want your voice, and I will continue to bother you until I get your voice. So, and that's where it's important, right? So, so these are things, again, just to consider. Where are you? How can you change this if you're not in a position where you're happy about it? And just think of these things in your PAC. And again, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Are there any questions, comments, anything that anybody wants to share in any of that? Okay, I think we're doing kind of good. And again, at any time, just put your hand up, raise your question, open your mic, that's all good. So quickly, we're going to talk about, I keep saying quickly, sorry, I gotta stop saying that. Executive position and roles, and typically they are chair, vice chair, recording secretary, treasurer, and a DPAC representative. And the DPAC representative is actually the only position that is actually listed in the School Act. The others are sort of expected as elected officers, but the DPAC rep is actually the only one that is legislated. And most of you know this already, but I'll just touch on it quickly. Gotta stop saying, I don't know, somebody's, put a block on me. So chair generally is a leadership role. They're responsible for making sure that each meeting is planned effectively. conducting according to the Constitution and bylaws, and that matters are dealt with in an orderly, efficient, and respectful manner. And the chairperson is also a leader that should make the most of their members, school members and partners, building, listening, and leading. And any member can chair a meeting. So a chair is a title with some roles and responsibilities. But any member can chair a meeting. It is the role of the chair. There's the duties and duties of the chair, which is to chair the meeting and do those things, which any member can take on. And then there's the position of the chair, which is typically the one that will deal with some matters directly with the administration and sort of work out events that are going to happen and those kinds of things. The vice chair, which is next, is basically exactly like the chair. They have all the duties and obligations of the chairperson. It is often seen as a training for chair position. And if you're in a PAC, encourage your vice chair or any other executive or any other member to chair a meeting. This is part of succession planning and engagement, that it is not, that you don't have that perception of autocracy, that it is, the chair is going to chair the meeting, the chair is going to do this, and the chair is going to do that. And, in some cases that may be if that's what's in your constitution and bylaws, but certainly in terms of building an engagement and succession planning, to have that training the trainee to be a trainer is part of that process. And again, vice chair or any member can chair a meeting. The secretary typically is the record keeper. They take minutes of meetings and ensures information is accurate. That information still has to be confirmed or approved by the membership, but that's part of what they do. And then maybe also be responsible for reviewing the constitution and bylaws and making sure that the executive and the chair is sort of following it, or give some tips on what we need to do to better follow it, or to suggest amendments to make it better. And again, any member can take minutes. The minutes are still approved by the membership, so it really doesn't matter who takes the minutes, because the membership still has to approve them. And the treasurer, quite simply, is the money keeper. In most PACs, this is your most critical and essential position and role for conducting any financial business. You'll need a treasurer if you want to apply for a gaming grant. You'll need a treasurer to do the financial transactions and that sort of thing. But if you're a PAC and you're not doing any fundraising, then you don't need a treasurer. And you're not applying for a gaming grant, then you don't need one. You don't need a treasurer to exist as a PAC, but it can certainly hamper what you're able to do. And we've got a question from Hummingbirds. Do minutes need to be approved by an actual vote or poll by members? And generally, yes. And sorry if I say that you should do something, please just remember that I'm probably not using the best words. I'm not telling you what to do, but generally is good practice. Yes, you can do minutes by one of a couple of ways. You can establish a minutes committee that is a select group of 3, 4, 5 people that approve the minutes as a committee after the meeting, so that the minutes can go out as approved, or the minutes are drafted up. They are brought to the membership, and then yes, it is done by a motion, which we'll talk about a little bit more detail later, which is essentially the vote to approve the minutes. And when the members approve the minutes, the members are saying this is an accurate reflection of what happened at that meeting. So, and I've seen it where some stuff comes up later and you got to go back 6 months or 2 years and you got to go, I don't think that happened at that meeting. And you've got a record of here's the minutes and the next minutes that show, oh no, that record was approved. That means whatever happened in those minutes is what actually happened. So that was approved by the membership anyways. So it is important to have it approved by the membership, and also financial institutions, especially if you're changing signing authorities. If you have to change signing authorities, they want to see that your motions, anything regards to financial practices, has been approved by your membership. And that's good, because that's what they should be doing. So as much as possible, you want to bring motions before the floor and have memberships confirm or make those decisions. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, great. Thank you. And the DPAC rep is your PAC's legislative representative to your district parent advisory council. This could be a PAC executive position. So as the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, DPAC rec. It could be, it's up to your PAC. And there's nothing in the School Act preventing PAC executives from also holding this role. So the PAC vice chair could also be the DPAC rep, for instance. But it might be encouraged to involve other parents in this role as much as possible. And so your DPAC rep in the School Act. The School Act limits a DPAC rep's term to not more than 1 year, but does not limit consecutive or multiple 1-year terms. So every year, the position of DPAC rep would come up for nomination and election, but the same person could be doing it for multiple years. It's just, as a PAC executive in your constitutional bylaws, you could say that the chair position is a 2-year term, or the vice chair position is a 3-year term, or whatever it happens to be. But for a DPAC rep, it cannot be longer than a 1-year term, and that's stipulated in the School Act. And I know that we've put this out before to most of our DPAC reps, but I'll include the link here as well. If anybody wants to look at it now, who, according to SD 42, DPAC, not all DPACs share the same language, but certainly this is our view on it. And your DPAC rep is your PAC's voice at the district level and should represent the views of the parents in your PAC or school. And so so in the School Act there, the election of a member to represent the Parents Advisory Council, voting in an election must be by secret ballot. And each PAC, and this is in the School Act, may annually elect one of its members to represent your PAC. And again, that's legislated in the School Act. Then you have other executive positions, and some common examples include member at large, hot lunch coordinator, fundraising coordinator, volunteer coordinator. And the question that you want to ask yourself, I mean, if it's in your constitution and bylaws, then that's how it is. But the question that you want to ask yourself as a PAC is, what does being an executive mean in your PAC, right? There are pros and cons to having other executive positions. So it really depends on how you feel about that. I hope we're doing good on time. And again, we are all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any questions or anything like that on that so far? Okay, we'll move right along. Anybody need a break or anything, or are we all okay to continue? I know we've only got about 45 minutes left. Okay, we'll just carry on then. So executive versus committee, the perception of executive versus committee. So executive positions in your constitution and bylaws means that these are required to be filled every year or declared vacant. Executive titles or positions may be daunting to some who say, well, I don't want an executive position. But it may help others feel more involved, where they say, oh, well, I'm an executive now, so that title has some meaning for them. But at the end of the day, executive positions are simply titles with obligations, and it is important to encourage that it is always the work that is important and not the title, right? Remember, anybody can chair a meeting. I mean, the chair has a responsibility to chair a meeting, but anyone can chair. It's the work of chairing the meeting that's important, not so much the position of chair. In a committee, most other executive positions can be easily structured as a committee. In the work and process, there really is or should be little or no difference other than the title. Committees can easily be created and dissolved as necessary and don't need to be declared vacant or come up for election or have to do that whole sort of process. And committee for some people generally sounds less imitating than holding an executive position, and over time may encourage more participants from those who want to be involved in a more casual way. So sitting on a committee kind of may tell parents, okay, well, I might have time to do that now, but not later. And an executive for some may be like, now I'm stuck in this and I got to do it. And you may not get the same involvement. Again, they're just ideas. I mean, all of these things can change in between different PACs, but again, just things to consider. And for PAC committees, the important framework is that committee includes a term of reference. And this sounds complicated, but it basically consists of 4 very simple things. And it can be done in basically 4 lines. What is the purpose of the committee? Hot lunch committee, right? What is the purpose of the committee? To set up and organize hot lunches. Why is it established? Because parents want hot lunches for their kids at school. What are the objectives? To provide a variety of sources for hot lunch and to deliver them to the students. And the reporting time frame, we report every PAC meeting as to how many lunches we delivered and how much money was fundraised. Like it can be that simple, but now everybody on this committee knows what the purpose of that is. And there should be a committee chair who can be any member, and a committee secretary to take very brief notes. You don't need minutes necessarily for a committee. It's just, oh, okay, well, we talked about this and that kind of thing. It can be very simple. So that's partially one of the difference between being a committee and being an executive, that some things on a committee can be very simple. And so that's that. So, and then I'll come back to ST42 DPAC, and I'll put our constitution and bylaws, which very much need to be amended and updated. I'll just put that in here as well. And so, and again, each Parents Advisory Council may elect a DPAC rep. There can only be one DPAC in each district. And I think with the odd exception, well, I believe that every district has a DPAC, although some are inactive or a couple are inactive. And that the school plan, and we'll talk about that, is what I referred to earlier. A board must disclose a school plan for every school in the district and make that available. And generally on your school webpage, you will have, I think it's from last year anyway, 2020, 2021 should be posted on your school's webpage what your school plan is. So you can go to your school webpage, look at that, and it'll be posted. And it is made available to all parts of it, all attendants attending that school. And included is the link to our constitution and bylaws. And what is the, oh, did I miss something? Sorry. No, that's right. Okay. And what is the purpose and operation? Again, this is in the School Act. This is not something we're making up. And it, again, very much like PACs, we may advise the board on any matter relating to education in the school district. We must also make, as a DPAC, bylaws governing its meetings and business, including dissolution. And again, the only thing I could see of a dissolution for us would be that the school district dissolved or amalgamated with another school district or something like that. It is very unlikely. There is no other reason for us to dissolve, even if there wasn't a single DPAC executive member to sit on it. And that the board, and unlike PACs, PACs can invite and not invite whoever they want, except that it should be open to their parents. But you don't have to invite your principal. You don't have to invite your vice principal. You don't have to invite those. DPAC is required under the School Act to invite a superintendent or their designate or a trustee to any of the DPAC meetings. So that is something that's a little bit different for DPACs than it is for PACs. I mean, obviously, for most PACs, you want your principal at your meeting, you want your administrator there. That's part of the whole purpose, is to engage in that kind of thing. But DPAC is obligated, and of course, we encourage all of our partner groups to attend all of our meetings, but that's the language in the School Act. And that the board may establish procedures on how DPAC provides that advice to the board. And again, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any questions on that? Hopefully this isn't too boring for anybody. I'm trying to make it a little bit interesting. And we'll go, I'm almost at it. Okay, so we're going to touch on conducting PAC executive elections. And the purpose of this is to be transparent and accountable. Again, all these slides will be made available. So elections are currently conducted according to your constitution and bylaws. A nominations committee, separate and apart, is an important part of transparency as much as possible. Sometimes we only have small groups. And again, we're volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. So we're just trying to look at some good practices where you can. They should be comprised of PAC members not standing for an executive position and willing to accept nominations and present them to the membership. Where you don't have someone in your PAC willing to stand, DPAC has offered to and has acted as a nominating committee before. And whether it's DPAC or some other third party that your membership agrees to, the important thing is that you have, as much as possible, you have a third party that is conducting the election so that your parents see that there's transparency and accountability, and that there's a third party running it and not being sort of run by either the current executive or those trying to get in to office. And nominees should always be confirmed to stand for the position by the nominating committee, whoever that is, before their name is put forward at the election. And that can be in verbal or in writing. You just want some confirmation. And usually you call for first nominations for any of the executive positions about a month or so before, saying here are the positions that are up for nomination. You have second call, which may be in between then. And then you have third and final call, which is either at the AGM or at the meeting, where it's everybody's last chance to put their name forward for this position. And immediately after third and final call, nominations are then officially declared closed, and the process of the election will begin. So at the time that the nominations are declared closed, if there is a vacancy, that position is now vacant, And then your vacancy language in filling that position, whether it be appointment or whatever, now applies, and it no longer follows the election process that that you're doing for your executive. And currently they are conducted on Zoom with the anonymous poll option. If there's more than one person willing to stand, there is an election. If there's only one person willing to stand, they may be acclaimed, although you can still have a motion to ratify that acclamation. And if there's nobody standing for position, it is declared vacant. Once the elections are complete, and this is also important, the names and positions are announced and a motion should be put forward similar to the following. Be it resolved that the 2021, for instance, 2022 XYZ Parent Advisory Council Executive be approved as presented. Now, this is a motion. This is going into your minutes, and this is a motion that establishes that this is a decision that is made by your membership at the meeting who is ratifying your election results. And again, I will tell you, many more financial institutions are looking for this kind of language in your minutes to make sure that it's not, so-and-so coming in saying, oh, by the way, we have to change signing authorities now because I'm, the new PAC treasurer or whatever. They want to see some documentation that a group has approved you to do that. And that's good because that's what they should be doing. And again, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any other questions on that? Okay, and as we go through this, I hope it's not, as we go through this, if you want to email us after for any clarification on some of this, please just email us and let us know. So here's an example. So you have an election for the position of chair. This is at the AG. So this is basically what's happening at the AGM. So you have third and final call for the nomination. Parent A has been nominated. The nominations are declared closed. Nobody else is putting their name forward, and parent A is now acclaimed into the position of chair. Third and final call for the position of vice chair, and you have parent B, parent C both nominated, and parent H has now been nominated from the floor, so they're added to that nomination. An election is conducted. It's conducted anonymously. The question is, election for the position of vice chair or something similar. It is single choice. Parent B, parent C, parent H, everybody votes. And if there is a 50+1, if that's in your constitution and bylaw, which it is in most, if it is a majority vote, so not just if one gets 40 and another one gets 30, another one gets 25, you generally drop the bottom one. And then the two top until you get a 50+1. In this case, parent C got 50+ and was declared elected as the vice chair. Election for the position of chair, treasurer, third and final call, nominated parent D, no other nominations, they are acclaimed. Motion that the PAC acclaim parent D to the position of treasurer. And there's a question, can you nominate yourself? Or does someone else need to nominate you? Yes, you may self-nominate. You may self-nominate or you may nominate someone else. Of course, the danger of nominating someone else is that I would check with them first to make sure that they're willing to accept the nomination. But absolutely, you can self-nominate it and say, yeah, I'd like to nominate myself and I'd be willing to stand for that position. So absolutely you can. Or certainly, again, it depends on your constitution and bylaws, but unless there's something to prevent it, I would certainly encourage that that be included. Election for the position of secretary, third and final call. Nobody's willing to stand for this position, right? So again, final call, still nobody willing to stand for this position. The nominations are closed. It is now declared vacant, so you now have a vacant executive position. Third and final call for the position of DPAC rep. We have parent E, parent F, both willing to stand for that position. The election is conducted, poll results shared, and parent E has the 50+1 and is declared elected into the position of the DPAC representative. The election for the position of member at large, and there are two positions in that constitution and bylaws for two positions for a member at large. So third and final call. So at third and final call, we had nominated parent A, parent G, so they were both nominated, but parent A has already been nominated into a previous position, a position of chair, and so is now dropped from being successful in a previous one, is now dropped from the member at large position, leaving another opening. And parent I from the floor says, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'd be willing to stand for that position. I'll self-nominate for that position. And now we have two nominations. So it started off with two other ones. One is dropped, another one gets added, willing to stand for the position. And Parent G and Parent I are now declared, so nominations are closed. Nobody else is going to stand for it, and both of them are declared acclaimed because it is for 2 positions available. And we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any questions on that?
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why would you have a member at large? I mean, what does that mean?
So that is an excellent question. It really depends on how your PAC is structured. So if like in a larger organization where you have a number of executive meetings and there are some decisions that are made at an executive meeting, or there's different participation in certain things, a member of large may have value. Sometimes it is, and again, it comes down to what's the difference between an executive and a committee. In DPAC, we have 3 members at large. And I think there's value in that at the district level because we have a number of different tables that we sit at, and the executive, and the members at large are considered executive as well. But that it can include our members at large and does to sit at other tables where just due to the number of tables that we do sit at. But in our executive meetings, we still aren't making the decisions. We don't need members at large to help us make decisions generally, except we're deciding on what kind of things we want to propose, what our budget's going to look like in our proposal. But in the end of the day, a member at large is like any other member. Like in our PAC, we have very few PAC executive meetings. We sort of have one just before our PAC meeting, and all the rest is kind of done through. I mean, particularly now because we're limited in what we can do, but all the rest is that we just text message each other and say, oh, do we and have that communication. So it really depends on how you're structuring. And again, some people like an executive title, a member at large can be that. But yeah, member at large, it is typically one of those things that is found in larger organizations where the executive sits down more often and has discussions about certain things. But in most PACs, it is a feel-good position in the sense that which is fine too. But yeah, it really depends on what you as a PAC, what your role of your executive is. In some PACs, the executive is making all the decisions, right? So if the executive is making all the decisions, then then having members at large is critical and important because you want to make sure that your general membership has that representation at the executive level. So it really just depends. I'm not satisfied with the definition of member at large is. Again, I think it's one of those things that this is the way we've always done it. And I don't know that people have a solid definition. Well, people who have member at large have a solid definition for that. Does that kind of make sense? Or am I just confusing it more?
No, yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, it does and it doesn't, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, no, it does. I'm okay with that. And if I need to clarify, I'll be in touch.
Yeah, like typically, if you've got a lot of people and like if you've got a large number of people that are showing up to PAC meetings, it really depends on your PAC. If you've got a large number of people showing up to PAC meetings, it may be helpful to have members at large to help sort of facilitate that process. But just remember that PACs wane in and out, and that if you have members at large and they're in your constitution and bylaws, that those are the positions that are required to be filled every year, or they could be vacant. So yeah, it just, there's no, like, I'm not for or against members at large. I think they have value, but it really depends on each PAC and each circumstance. Like our PAC, we don't have any members at large, but there's no I mean, with the involvement that we have, that we wouldn't have any, I don't want to say any use, but it's the value of having a member at large wouldn't be the same for us as it might be for other PACs that have different situations.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay, well, thank you for the question. And so then conducting a meeting, I'm just kind of watching our time frame. I think we're pretty much. Yeah, sorry, I see a comment. We have members at large. It allows for more people to be involved. If other executive positions are filled, they just don't have a specific duty. And and again, and that's correct. And again, that would come down to But any parent can be involved, right? And again, it's like any parent can be involved, whether they're a member at large or not, they can be involved in doing all those things. And it's really how you fit your definition of member at large. As far as I'm concerned, all of our parents are members at large. And so, but again, it's, you know, it really just, whatever works for your, at the end of the day, what works for your PAC? What is helping to make your PAC successful? And if it works, then great. There's, yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So agendas, motions, minutes, and adjournment. So conduct of PAC meetings, I know most of you know this already. The focus of PAC meetings should be to engage in discussions, collaborations with administrators, staff, and other parents that may result in action or information. And this is stressed often. And again, I know you guys already know this. PAC meetings should never be a forum to discuss or express concerns or opinions about individuals, whether they be about staff or other parents. I mean, certainly if you want to acknowledge someone for, oh yeah, so-and-so did this is great, we should acknowledge them, that's a different story. But someone to say, you know what, I don't know about this person and what's going on, whether they be a parent or a staff, you have that discussion offline, either directly with that person or with the PAC executive if it's about another PAC member, or with the administrator if it's about a staff. And it's always about conducting business fairly and respectfully. And all PAC members are bound by the same rules and code of conduct. So meetings. So we have meeting notice, special meetings, presenters and guests, and quorums. So a meeting notice should be put out in advance as much as possible and in accordance with your constitution and bylaws. Use your social media to promote any upcoming meeting, and you can always ask your administrator if they can put that information out to parents on portal. Put out regular and repeated reminders, and when possible, include an agenda for the next meeting so that people know what's coming up in the next meeting. And as we all know, many people don't read them, and that's fine, but at least you can say you put the information out there. Now, a special meeting is a meeting that may be required when urgent PAC business must be attended that cannot wait until the next regular meeting. So you just had a regular meeting, and a couple of days later, somebody comes up and says, oh my gosh, we've got this great idea, but we have until Friday to figure it out. And this is a great opportunity, got this huge discount on whatever. And in your PAC, the decision to have that or to spend resources on providing this special event would come out of PAC funds. You need a meeting for the members to pass that motion to do that. Sorry. And special meetings are conducted according to your CMB and generally for the purpose of only conducting the urgent business. So the special meeting should meet the minimum requirements for notice, which could be 3 or 5 or 7 days. Sometimes it's as soon as possible if the chair decides that it's a particular urgency and doesn't meet the normal minimum requirement of notice. And you also have to meet quorum for a special meeting. It's still required to meet the same quorum. And the agenda for that meeting should simply be adopt the agenda, which is to conduct the urgent business and adjourn. And no other business should be conducted at that meeting. It does happen. We had one last year. They are relatively rare, but it does happen, and it's a good tool to use where if a decision has to be made, you can put that back to the membership and says, here's a great idea, but we need the PAC to pass this motion. Presenters and guests, PAC may and often do have all kinds of different presenters at their meetings for any number of things. That is great and totally fine. They are invited as guests and at the discretion of the chair. Anyone at a PAC meeting who is not a PAC member, that is a parent or guardian at the school with the fulsome and liberal definition of parent, is an invited guest and participates in the meeting at the discretion of the chair and the membership. Administrators who are not parents at the school are guests, and that's just to say they're invited. I've seen some PAC constitutional bylaws where their principal takes a more active role in their PAC, and that's fine. But if they don't meet the definition of a parent under the School Act, then they are not a member and they are not entitled to belong. Quorum is the minimum number of members that must be present at any of your meetings to make the proceedings valid. This should be set out in your CNB and recorded in your minutes. I'll talk about the minutes after. First name and surname initial only, and this is specific or important for PACs. If you do not meet the quorum according to your constitutional bylaws, then no business other than some maybe general discussion should be made. And at our PAC, I'm constantly putting it out. If we don't meet quorum, none of this stuff is going to happen. And I'm actually looking forward to the day where we don't meet quorum so that we can say, this didn't get passed, this didn't get passed, this didn't get passed, and this didn't get passed because we didn't meet quorum. Please show up to the next meeting because otherwise these things don't happen. And again, it's another way that is part of engagement to say, you are valuable. We need you. If you don't show up, this can't happen. And sometimes it takes a demonstration in order for that to sink through. Meetings, generally agenda, motions, minutes. So the agenda, again, is an agreement that you present to say, these are the things we're going to discuss. And as much as possible, you want to stick to the agreement of the agenda so that everybody knows this is what we're discussing. If a surprise comes up, that does happen. But if it's going to be something of significant value or significant decision, the chair does have, the chair can put that forward to the next meeting pending further discussion, or can certainly bring that up to have the decision made at the next meeting. So here's just an example. You have your introductions, your territory acknowledgement, you have your adoption of the agenda, the approval of the minutes, which is both are motions, and then you have your reports, principals, treasurers, DPAC report, old business, update on the decorating prizes, spiritware. Oh, no, we have new. So it was discussed at the last meeting, but now we have distribution dates, new business, parent voice, which we'll talk about, and all these things, and then adjournment, and then your information on your next upcoming meeting. And that's your typical agenda. So that's your agenda, and then you vote on the agenda. And a motion is a means to bring a matter forward before the assembler. And there are different types of motions. And again, we're going to focus on Robert's rules as the intent of Robert's rules. And there are 5 classes of motions. We're only going to talk about the first 3. Main motions, which is that the agenda be adopted as presented. That's a main motion. And that's the motion that most PACs have. Subsidiary motions are ones which affect the main motion or which apply directly to the main motion. And privileged motions are those which are urgent matters that need to be addressed regardless of the motion that's already before the floor. Incidental motions and motions, again, that bring up a matter are relatively rare, if ever, used at a PAC meeting. So we're not going to discuss them, but just for you to be aware that these are things that we have. So a main motion, this is the type of motion most common, and it initiates the original discussion on any action or decision on a substantive question or idea. And most of you know this part already. Subsidiary motion directly relates to the main motion, and common examples include, oh, we want to amend the main motion, or we need some more information on this main motion, so let's motion to postpone bringing this motion forward to a later date, whether it be the next meeting or later on towards the end of the meeting. And those are 2 common examples. Privileged motion is the one that can be brought up at any time, including during a motion on the floor. And common examples of those are point of order. This item is not on the agenda. We can't discuss this right now. That can be brought up at any time. Or say you have a motion before the floor and there's a lot of discussion going on about it. There's 2 things that can happen. If people want more discussion, they can say, we need a motion to have a recess so we can take a break and then come back. Or the motion is to call the question, which means that we've had enough in this discussion. Let's bring forward a motion to call the question, which is, we don't need to discuss it anymore, for or against. We're just going to bring the motion forward and people are going to vote on it. And that motion still, all those motions still, well, with the exception of point of order, which is decided by the chair. But if you want to take a recess or call the question is immediately put to the members, those in favor of calling the question. If it's all in favor or the majority is in favor, then discussion on the motion is ended, and then the question is brought forward. Again, very rarely happens, but it is something that can happen, that can be brought forward. Flow of a motion, the motion is proposed usually by the chair, but doesn't have to be. The motion has to be moved by someone. It is seconded by someone, a member, and then the motion is open for discussion. And then the question is called, or the motion is called. Now, quite often in PACs, a lot of the discussion happens first, and then we have the motion that is brought forward, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just remember that the discussion portion would still continue, even though you've had all the discussion. Bringing the motion forward, it is moved, seconded. Any further discussion on this motion that you've already discussed, and then you follow through and have the vote. And then the motion is either carried 50+1 or defeated. And again, the adoption of the agenda, we kind of went through this, the process. The proposed motion is that the agenda be adopted. It is moved, seconded, discussion. Even if you had the discussion before, it's still open for discussion. You launch the poll or call a question. All those in favor, all those opposed, or any opposed, and the decision is carried or defeated. Minutes. So generally minutes are to capture attendance to confirm quorum, and first names, initials, particularly in PACs. We have parents and staff, for instance, that have protection orders, that have issues about their name being made public, and we want to be careful of that kind of thing. And yes, we have one quick question. Go ahead.
Just sorry, back to the motions. This is one thing that I'm really unclear about.
Yep.
Do you mind just giving us an example? Just the script you would use? Like, do you just say, I call this motion, or just what exactly do you say?
Yeah, so what you could do is you could say, okay, but remember it's on the agenda, right? So generally these are items on the agenda. What I might say, for instance, is that, so on the agenda, we have the adoption of the agenda. Can I get someone to move the motion that the agenda be adopted as presented? And then you ask for a seconder, and then say, and we can certainly go through that process. I'll go through the process right now. So we've got a motion, proposed motion before us to adopt the agenda. Can I get a mover to adopt that agenda? Someone would say yes. And then can I get a seconder? Again, it's not that you agree with the motion, it's that you agree to hear it. And then I get a seconder, and then it's open for discussion. So anybody want to discuss the agenda? Anybody want to make any changes? Anybody want to ask any questions as to why this is on the agenda? Is there something missing from the agenda? This is the chance for everybody to have a discussion on why, or any issues about why we're adopting this agenda. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, that sounds good. So you call it, you ask someone to move, second, then you have your discussion about whatever it is, and then you do your vote.
Right, and then yeah. So the question is the question. So the question is basically the motion, and the motion is, I mean, it's not sort of written as a question, but consider it written as a question. Like, are we adopting the agenda as presented? And so that is the question, and the question is, do you vote in favor or against? So you have a discussion, and then you say, okay, if there's no more discussion, and you sort of put that out there, then we're gonna vote. We're gonna call the question, which is, do we adopt the agenda as presented? And then people vote in favor or opposed or abstain, and then the motion is either carried or defeated. And definitely what I can include is I can sort of include a little bit of a script in that as well.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. I'm being cognizant of the time. So capture relevant information in your minutes. Note general discussion, but should not often identify specific persons. It's the ideas and information that are important, not who. Unless it's just like the principal is saying, okay, we have 452 students in our school, then maybe attribute that to the principal, or the PAC treasurer is saying, you know, we spent $450 in funds on this. But anybody that asks a question, doesn't matter who's asking the question, unless it's, you know, unless it's specifically identified for a specific person, even the answer doesn't need to be identified. The question was asked that blah, 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 blah. And the answer is blah, 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 blah. And because ideas or actions are adopted or rejected by the members as a group, not just by one person. So it doesn't matter what the person thinks or what the idea is. If it comes to an idea that comes to a vote, it's the group. And questions and answers should just be simply presented as information. Capture motions, because those are the decisions that are being made by your PAC. Decisions, informations, and any actions should include when the next meeting is. And the main purpose is to record the business of the council so that everybody knows, okay, this is what happened, this is how it happened, and this is what we're going to do about it. But also to provide that information, kind of like if you think of it in the terms, like it sort of ends up at being like a quasi PAC newsletter, right? And this is what happened at our meeting, this is how it goes. But the final approved minutes, when they were approved either by committee or at the next meeting by the membership, should be the only record of the meeting that you distribute and keep. And that is always important. Other drafts and whatever don't matter. It should only be the record of that. And reports, typical reports are the principal's report, the treasurer report. You can include correspondence and committee reports. And what do those kind of look like? You have your principal and vice principal report, and I think everybody knows what they are. They kind of let everybody know what's going on in the school. Then you have your treasurer's report, which for most people, it's a quick summary of where we're at is generally a good idea and shows that their money is being accounted for. You want to include what's in your gaming account, what's in your general account, the total funds that are available. Or you can include pending funds, or in the last month we spent, we provided funds for a new slide or this or that, and sort of keep parents, your members, up to date. Correspondence could be your PAC has got emails from vendors who are saying, if you want to use us for a plant sale or whatever. Any information sent from the district or by the principal, update on ongoing correspondence related to PAC events. So we heard back from, the person doing the carnival stuff, and this is what they say about it. But never includes confidential or privileged information. Whether you include the correspondence reports is really up to you. Is just there as an example. And committee reports can include haunt lunch committee, active school travel update, school fun fair committee update, that sort of thing, and that can be included on your agenda. And again, remember, we're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Any questions on any of that? I'm going to try to wrap this up the next 10 minutes. I know that we're close to being at the end. And then meetings also consist of 4 other components: old business, new business, parent voice, and adjournment. So old business is that which is left over from the new or old business. Sometimes you can have old business that is ongoing if it's not resolved. And could include any follow-up from something that was addressed as new or old business in a previous meeting, any updates, and any attempt or steps to take to conclude or find resolve to any business that hasn't already been conducted and or made known to the membership. And that would be your old business. New business is simply that which has not been previously brought forward and is being introduced for the first time. Your parent voice and your questions can be an integral part to your PAC meeting. And quite frankly, if it weren't for this section, the chair could simply adjourn the meeting, because if all the items in your agenda have been met, the chair can say, well, we've met all the items in the meeting, so I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned. One of the reasons that we want to consider this in a PAC is because this is a forum for parents to raise concerns. And when you put it to the membership to adjourn the meeting, it means that the membership is deciding that we don't need to hear anything from anybody anymore. So it's important that the chair put this out, much like calling the question in any discussion on a motion, that it's a sort of final opportunity to anyone to have their say. They could be questions that are directed to the principal about what's going on to the school, could be directed to the PAC executive about things that aren't on the agenda. And then when you agree to the agenda and somebody brings up something halfway through and says, I'd like to talk about this, that's when the chair says, well, it's not on the agenda, but we can certainly talk about that in the parent voice section, right? And that's the opportunity to do that. And it's an open forum where parents should be made feel welcome to bring any issue forward without judgment, and does not represent a concern or complaint about any individual. And that's very important. And then again, it's up to the chair to say, okay, anybody else, making sure that everybody else has that opportunity to say, okay, that's, there's no more questions. And then when the chairs feel okay, nobody else is bringing any questions forward. And again, this is a perception thing. So it's not the chair saying, you know what, I don't want to hear from this person. So I'm just going to adjourn the meeting. But it's putting it to again, as much as possible, you're putting that decision to the members at the meeting to make those decisions. And what if someone is offered to do something or volunteer? Sorry, a question here. Could a first name and be included to look back on? Oh yeah, so first names are always fine. It's the surname initial. Or again, this is just, I'm not saying this is what you should do. But most people know with the first name and the surname initial, especially if they're volunteering to do something, the executive knows who they are. And it's just sort of a record for people to say. But yeah, anything in the minutes, or if someone is offered to do something, or someone saying, I'm putting together something, you could say Maria L has offered to put this together. Please get a hold of the PAC and we'll pass that information on to you, or something along those lines. Does that kind of make sense? You just want to be careful with providing names that don't address people where they're uncomfortable with somebody asks a question and then say, oh, Maria L asked this question, and and then some people may or may not like the question. You just want to avoid that kind of thing. Does that sort of make sense, Hummingbird? Or am I not answering the question? Okay, perfect, thank you. Yeah, and again, the thing is, you just want to be careful with names, just because it's a school, and the motion is either carried or defeated. And again, we are all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Okay, PAC Treasure 101, we're starting to run out of time. We've presented this before. These are just some good ideas. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through here. And these are, again, just some things to think about. You want to have 3 or 4 people be signing authorities as much as possible. Float front transparency with numbers. Here's an example of PAC budget proposal. And again, it's just examples. There's many different ways to do this. Some are maybe better than others, and that's totally fine. Just some ideas of what it could look like. And then your PAC budget is always passed by your members. And again, that's important, so that everyone who's at the meeting has approved the budget, and then it's not just approved by 1 or 2 people and the motion is carried or defeated. And again, all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Social media within your PAC, try to make sure that it's a private or closed group, or if a page that you are cautious about providing information that leads directly to individual parents or students. It should have some clear discussion, or could have some clear discussion with rules about a PAC or school-based focus. You can have one group that is PAC and school, you can have another group that is community-based focus, or you can combine the two. And use it to remind parents of important school days, Pro D Day coming up, Picture Day coming up, dates on the student-led conferences, and try to have at least 2, if it's a PAC page or group, have at least 2 to 4 admins be admins, so you never have one person that is managing and responsible for the messaging, right? You all share in the decisions of whether you have to address a post, whether it be deleted or whatever, and that you're making the decision as a group, and that it's not in the hands of one person to say, well, I like this or I don't like that, and that's how you deal with it. And again, that is just part of building engagement. Not all parents feel comfortable having one person in charge of whether they're going to approve their posts or not. And engagement, be patient. It can be a 2 to 3 year process. Parents are members and partners. They're not customers. Be honest and factual as PAC executives, even if parents may not like what you have to say. I've had to tell parents things they don't want to hear, but that they need to know. Be confidential when required, and be sure that people can believe that you can be confidential, and that their conversations with you with private matters are privileged. Share information when appropriate. Smile often, and remember that some parents are already overstretched in their own lives, but they're also often ready to help out when they can and given an opportunity that they are able to meet. Be a trusted source of information, bring ideas forward, and encourage others to do the same. That is a big part of engagement, is encouraging others to bring forward their ideas, and constantly remind parents that they are all PAC members. And succession planning, one of the toughest obligations of any PAC executives. It is built on engagement, and it is built on considering all the things that we have talked about and finding ways to incorporate that into your PAC members. Start early, 2 to 4 years in advance. If you're in, if you're going to be graduating out of grade 7 in 2 years, start your planning now. Start identifying parents now, maybe even 3 years in advance. Encourage participation and responsibility for your parents. Expose parents to aspects of the executive role in either shadowing or letting them chair a meeting while you're there to help them, or taking minutes or other duties. But at the end of the day, someone is going to step into that role when you leave or exit out. And hopefully you will have left your PAC better than you found it. And if you can encourage and lend your support before you leave to your successors to leave it better than they found it. And again, this is, you got to start early, and you got to encourage them to be better than you were, and that they will have tools that you didn't have the year before, and so on and so on and so on. And as much as we can do that, we'll be leaving PACs in better shape. And much of our information can be stored digitally. It's a great way to easily pass on information to those who take over. And last but not least, look after yourself. Self-care, you can only do what you can do. Sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it's hard. We don't have all the answers. And again, no matter what you've seen here today, I don't have all the answers. I try to put things into perspective from what I've learned as in my experience. And some people are frustrating, and some people can frustrate you. Any of us can easily get frustrated. We're all volunteers doing the best you can with what you have. And if you need any support from us as DPAC, where we can provide resources or anything like that, answer your questions, that's certainly what we're here for. And again, we're not here to say that what you're doing is wrong, or you're doing, that you need to do certain things in a certain way. We want to help you be successful. That is our role. And whatever we can do to help you be successful and meet the things of what you need, then that is part of our role to do. So before we have this motion to adjourn, look at that. We're almost right on time, even though I kind of whipped through things. I'm just going to, I did that before. Just going to do one quick poll. And again, this is, oops, sorry. Info. Oh, no. Sorry, bear with me. Where is it here? Oh, I'm not looking. Again, if people could just take a few minutes to sort of answer the survey. I want to just sort of gauge. This is our first time sort of doing this. This was done with some of the input from our executives, sort of adding things in. We would like to improve this. We want to make sure that this has value for you. This is all anonymous, so you don't have to worry about, oh, so-and-so thinks this is whatever. So if you can, just sort of take a few minutes to kind of do that. Does anybody have any questions on anything, anything that we saw and heard today?
You mentioned that you would send us maybe a bit of a script of what it sounds like to call a motion. Would it be appropriate to ask you to share your wording of your acknowledgement that you used?
Well, yeah. And so what we have is that so everything that we've seen today, the entire PowerPoint, it will be converted to a PDF and then sent to you. But before I do that, what I'll do is I'll include another slide with the example. So everything, does that make sense? Everything that you saw today, including right from the beginning, from the acknowledgement to all the links that were included, and because it'll be translated into PDF, you'll be able to click on all the links, but is that sort of, so the example of the acknowledgement will be exactly what you saw. Everything you saw today will be in what I'll be sending everybody shortly. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And then before I do that, I'll just add in that into the motion thing. I will add in a slide for the sample. And so, yeah, so before we adjourn, yeah, any other discussion or any other questions? Or anything? Well, I hope everybody is still there. I appreciate everybody hanging out. I'm actually surprised that I got everything to fit into the 2 hours. And the recording is actually going to be on YouTube. So it's live on YouTube. So you'll be able to see it on YouTube whenever you like.
You did amazing. And yes, very handsome.
I was hoping to put some more in. So we were hoping to put sort of some more fun kind of Jeopardy type questions in as we went along, and of course you just ran out of time. So it is kind of dry stuff, and we're trying to make it as interesting as possible without.
Of course, it was perfect.
So anyway, but
it was actually a lot of fun. It was actually really informative. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay, good. And like I say, we want to improve on every time. I know 2 hours is a long time. Maybe it's too long. Maybe we can make some things quicker. It's got to be of value to you guys. That's the whole point. Otherwise, I mean, we can make it 4 hour long, but if it's not of value to you, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So we want to hear from you as we move forward. If there's things that are missing, please let us know. We really appreciate it.
It was really great, Chris, as always. And it's really important that if people have questions that they email DPAC, and, there's no judgment, and all questions are important questions. Like, there's no silly question, because there's so much information and there's so many things to know. So if anyone thinks of something small or something that was covered or not, please feel free to email DPAC, and we can help you figure that information out.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. And we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what you don't know. So, if we're spending a lot of time telling you stuff that you already know, then we need to move around. And the resources for PACs that are out there is daunting. There are reams and pages, and so we've tried to kind of condense the important things. Well, there's lots of other important things, but hopefully it gives you a framework so that you can build out from there to answer more questions. And it's a work in progress, and it's about building on our knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, for everyone that can finish up there, and then I guess we'll, if I can have, oops, what did I do? Sorry, one sec. Okay, so, and with our thing, if I could have a motion to adjourn, please. And again, it's a workshop, so we're just going through we don't really need to adjourn it, we just end it. But again, it's about practice, and it's about putting it to you guys to say if you want to adjourn it or you want to keep going. So if I could have a mover that the workshop be adjourned, and a seconder. Anybody second the motion?
There's a bunch of hands up.
Oh, okay, perfect. And and for PACs, it is not important. It's not necessarily important that you put down who moves the motion or who seconds the motion or who brought forward the motion. It is just important that it is moved and seconded. And again, as much as possible, unless it's absolutely necessary, like someone said, someone is offering to volunteer, then yes, identify who they are. So as much as you can. But for this kind of stuff, when the PAC approves the minutes later, they're approving that the motion was moved and seconded. So we don't need to know who it was. And people do have that misunderstanding of that people are moving and seconding the motion because they agree or disagree with the motion, and that's not the case. Any other discussion on adjourning the workshop?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, then seeing none, we will call the question. Katie, if I can get you, oh, I guess we have to end the one. I'm going to assume, we'll just call the question. All those in favor, you can raise your hand. And any opposed? And the motion is carried. So it's either carried or defeated. In this case, it's carried. Remember, this is the one thing I want you to take more than anything else. We're all volunteers doing the best we can with what we have. Thank you for everyone for your participation. Thank you for filling out our survey. And we'll see you all at the next DPAC meeting. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.